And next is just going to do extra bits like grip roll.
Rear camber.
Oh yeah, rear camber, sorry.
Rear camber, I don't know what other people use, but for the way this is set at 2.5 camber when it's pressed down. Again, that can be changed depending on how much roll your car has, because obviously the camber's designed so as your car's going around the corner, when it rolls you'll get in the flat half of the tyre. So if you've got a fast circuit, you might have to adjust the camber because it's rolling more, or if you stiffen up the rear end, you might have to adjust the camber. So again, it's just something you need to play with for every car until you get that perfect position, you know?
Yeah, and again, like the front, like the camber, it's all about balance, and it's all about kind of coming out of that corner, and most times we don't really change the rear camber because it's you can change it, and it changes the car performance quite heavily. So it's not something you want to do if you need a slight bit of difference on the rear end. That's where you go to rear towing. But if you change the rear towing and the rear is still going, no, I want to slide out, then you maybe go, okay, I'll change the rear camber, or you change the rear shock position. But yeah, the rear camber is something you tend not to really need to touch. It's kind of set at a certain point, and you might want to play around with it, of course, just to see what it does to the rear performance of it, but generally you kind of leave it the way it is, and you change the rear based on either shock position or essentially towing.
Also, a lot of we see it a lot where you'll get one guy who's really quick on the track, and you'll say he's got the perfect setup, so you copy his setup, and you wonder why the car isn't quick. Everybody's driving style is completely different, so you know, we found this out over the years that we can go to a circuit and we tend not to look at other RS5s. We tend to go our own way. And then when he's got the balance, he said, that car's good. You compare it to someone else's car, it's different. Because his driving style is different to other people. He's a lot more vicious on his driving style. Other people are smoother, so because they're smoother, they need different settings. So don't, just because a guy is quick, copy his settings, because your driving style will not be the same. So always try and go down your own route to fine tune it.
Like, For me, I know, yeah, okay, I'm an aggressive driver, I am. It's like I always like to have a bit of aggression. It's like go hard or go home. But I always, as I said, it comes down to I always want to make sure that my car is easy to drive. When my car is easy to drive and it has that little bit of aggression, but essentially once it's easy to drive, I'm happy. And then I kind of tend to say to people, well, look, mine's easy to drive. It's at a base out, but you're welcome to try it, but change it if you need to. You have a smoother steering style. So if they have a smoothing steering style, they can afford to have a bit more aggression on the front end because they can control that front end. Whereas I'm a little bit like, I'm a little bit slapstick, so to speak, in terms of I just go into the corner and I'm more like just turn in and that's it, and I expect the car to kind of do what I want it to do. And other drivers, they're like, nope, I want to take it easy, I want to take it easy. Therefore, they can have a more aggressive front because they can control that. Whereas if my car was set up for an aggressive front end driver, I wouldn't be able to control it because I'd turn in and the car would just go in and it'd go into grass and that's it, and I'd be like, no way. Next is rear roll bar.
Sorry, if you're adjusting rear camber, are you supposed to release the shocks and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's yeah, of course, you just release the shocks and you just change the camber and then you set it up, and always check after you do each change in terms of if it changes the rest of the car. But next is rear roll bar.
Rear roll bar, again, obviously, as it speaks for itself, it's to control the amount of roll on the rear. So if you have the car too stiff, like if we put the roll bar to the maximum stiffness around here, the back end there won't be any grip. It will just throw itself out all the time. If you have it on the minimum, it does work here, but on a lot of circuits, like a smooth circuit in Craigavon, if you have it on the minimum, when you're going through the chicane at speed, the car's just rolling from side to side and it's just thrown back out. So again, you've got to play with that rear roll bar until you find the happy medium. And you've got to cover the fast corners as well as the chicane slow corners. And
the biggest effect for a roll bar, for a rear roll bar, is that isn't going into an initial corner. It's when you go from one corner to the next, as in a chicane or a set of corners, or where you have to jolt from left to right into that corner or to tweak it. That's the biggest effect a rear roll bar makes. Like, and for example, Wade has his rear roll bar set at a looser set, and I know it's a different car, but we tried that on ours, and I didn't like it myself
because he's a bit very quick, so I had to stiffen up roll bar to stop it rolling.
Because it was rolling a bit too much on the rear, which kind of affected the feeling of the front steering. Because the rear was kind of going, no, I want to lean into this corner, I want to take the grip. So the front was like, okay, I can't turn in, you know. So the rear roll bar only affects the roll going from like a chicane and going from one corner to another. It will affect on a bank corner a little bit, and it will affect on a camber affecting corner a little bit, but mainly it's only going from one corner to another. Next is grip roll.
Grip roll, well, we sort of covered grip roll in the sense that a lot of people tend to think it's a rear that causes grip roll. It's always the front. It's always the front that causes grip roll. There's a number of things you can do. You can bring your caster back. You can put loads of camber on. You can put a very worn tyre. Another little trick: if you've got really high grip and you're running C's all round, you know, and a lot of people think, oh, I've got grip roll, I want to go hard. They put a D on the front. Go the other way. Put a soft tyre on the front. It'll overheat. Once it overheats, it won't grip.
Yeah,
absolutely perfect. In the
I'd say that the Euros here,
championships here,
2000.
every car was rolling on the corner there. Every car, and all had the same problem. We ended up putting a worn A on the front to C's everywhere else, and the A just burnt out. And there's no grip roll at all.
But that A still gave that little bit of grip on the smaller corners, so you had the steering, you know. And as I said, that's why also you can play with Ackerman angles and everything like that. Next is ride height.
Ride height, well, speaks for itself. I mean, it depends on circuits. For example, in Craigavon, where we run, it's a very smooth circuit. We can run a 5mm ride height on the front and a 6mm on the rear. Here we're running an 8 and an 8. The reason we're running 8 and 8, normally you have the rear higher, because we're trying to, if you have the rear higher, when you're braking, all the weight's going forward. So we're trying to eliminate the problem of digging. So by rising the front, and there's no reason why you can't have it higher at the front. Yep. Again, when you brake, because that's when it's affecting the ride height, when you brake, the weight transfer isn't affecting that front end more. So if you've got a problem with like high grip, you can always have the front higher than the rear. Yep. There's no rule of thumb saying it has to be the other way.
And as I said, again, like a couple of things like rear towing and even shock position, play around with it. You know,
the trick is to have as low a ride height as possible, because obviously it's
it comes into the centre of gravity, and
I mean we're running 8 and 8, and as you can see, it's still rubbing it quite a bit.
Next is gear ratio.
Gear ratios all depends on the engine. A lot of people make the mistake, they gear up their car for the fastest part of the track and then wonder why their car's as dead as a dodo around the corners. A prime example is Switzerland, where there's 100-metre straight. You could put on the highest gear ratio and have fantastic speed down the straight, but there's 10 or 12 corners, 15 corners. So your car is as slow as anything. When you do a lap time, you can't figure why. So you have to gear your car up for the infield, which, believe it or not, is the same gear ratio as here. And what it means is when you're going down a straight, you're hitting full speed after 10 metres, and you're just sitting there, car's going full speed down the straight. And you think, it's a slow lap time, but it isn't, because you've got all the infield. Yeah. So you always gear your car for the infield corners rather than the straight.
You know, coming out of that corner, you want to be able to put the power down, and that engine's going, yeah, I'll have some of that, and gives it. You know, you don't want to be like, give me about 2 seconds, mate, and I'll put the power down. No, you don't want that. You want to come out of the corner and you want to go, okay, I'll have it. That's it.
And again, it all varies with different engines, because some engine tuners have low, high-powered bottom end, some have high-powered top end, some are general all the way. So again, it's something you have to play with.
Yeah. Next is shock oil and springs. Again, this is something that you can play around with, and again, like we've explained with the front and rear end, it affects the car performance kind of quite a good bit, and it's something you can play around.
And if you're on a smooth circuit, you can go for a harder shock oil, because you don't need that shock absorbing as much. So
like normally on our car we have what is it?
6,000 on the rear.
6,000 on the rear and 8,000 on the front. We've stayed with 8,000 here, but yeah, we've gone down to 5,000 on the front, because it gives that rear on the rear. Sorry, because it gives that rear a little bit kind of more bounce and a little bit kind of softness, so that it puts the rear grip on more. in past years on different models of the RS5 when it was more positive on the front, we were using 12,500 oil on the front.
Well, we're at the European
positive.
Championships in Portugal this year, and I can honestly see us going to 10,000 oil on the front because it's going to be that much grip.
Yeah.
We just want it stiffer so it doesn't dig in.
But also, if you put stiffer oil on the front, on the front especially, it's going to affect the steering on the small corners as well, because it's not even more on the small corners, because if you're going from high speed straight to low speed in terms of braking, that's when the shock oil is on the front is affected the most, because it's dipping down, and that's what causes grip roll. But if you have too heavy of a shock oil on the front, when you go into small corners where it's not even going from that high to that low speed, it's barely going to dip in at all, and you're going to have no steering coming into the corner. So play around with it, but it's not something you should crucially change unless you feel you have to. But play around with it and see what it does.
Also, a very important fact with shock oil, which people don't do, shock oil breaks down big time.
Yeah.
And people do not think about changing shock oil. We change shock oil after every day of around about an hour's running. Like yesterday, the amount of runs we did, we changed a shock oil.
Yeah.
Makes a massive difference. So
So
you can see when you pour your shock oil out after just one day of running,
Yeah.
it's black.
Especially,
It breaks down.
especially on the well, on any car, on absolutely any car. Okay, we have like bigger bore shocks, which means that the shock oil in it just works a little bit better. But on the minis, where they're a little bit smaller, that oil is going to break down in.
Yeah, you're going to have your car and you're going to say that's perfect for the finals tomorrow, but it won't be as good
No.
because your shock oil won't be the same. It'll
So
be breaking
when-
down, so
when-
it'll be 1,000 or 2,000 less than what it was because it's broken down.
And then it's going to affect the car performance.
So change your shock oil.
And we did that for years. We kind of didn't think about changing shock oil, and then we kind of realized, here it's one of the best things you can actually have is a fair amount of shock oil with you, and kind of go, okay, I'll have no problem changing it. It's the simplest thing you can change.
And the same thing, I mean, I know it's just sort of going away from it, but it's a general thing. Same as a spark plug on an engine.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with an engine is the spark plug. Okay? I put a new spark plug in every day. It's only £5, £7, whatever, but it's a spark plug that's always going to break down first. And it's a racing engine. Well, it's not even a standard engine.
Even
it's doing a lot of
standard
work.
engines.
It's running oil.
Yep.
For the cost of that, put a spark plug in. The engine's
Yep.
going to be reliable.
Exactly. Next is brake bias.
Yeah, brake bias, front to rear. That is very preferential to everybody. Some people like a lot of front brake and a lot of rear. Some people like only a brake that doesn't lock up on the front, and they like a no brake on the rear. Again, it's a feeling you want, but ideally you need to race a car the same as you drive a real car, okay? If you're driving a real car, you don't go into a corner and brake in the corner. You always brake before the corner. And with a racing car, you do exactly the same. You jab the brakes before the corner and power going round the corner. So if you have too much brake on the rear, when you're braking, the back end will go. So you just have to back that back brake off.
Yeah, like over the years, as I've kind of, so to speak, gotten a little bit better or gotten more experience. I wouldn't say I've gotten better, but as I've gotten more experience, I've kind of changed my braking style. I used to have it so that when I broke, okay, I had that initial braking, but if I turned while braking, the brakes, as I turned, the brakes would actually release, because I wasn't a good enough driver that I could actually brake first and then take off the brakes and then turn in. I just wasn't experienced enough. And then I kind of realized that, okay, I need to have confidence, I need to get used to this. So I said, okay, have it so that when I brake, and if I turn, the brakes are still locking. It's okay now because I automatically take off the brakes. But me as a driver, yeah, I have that initial brake, and once I feel that initial brake, I might dab 2 or more times after that and then turn into a corner. But others are different. Others might want it so that they brake less or they brake more. But always kind of make sure you have a feeling of the brakes and then change them to suit yourself, and always don't really adjust them too much. But just on your controller is the most important thing. Adjust them by 5 or 6 notches at a time. And from a mechanic's point of view, I never recommend pushing your driver to kind of change your brakes. Just say to them, look, are they enough for you? Are they enough on the front? Are they enough on the rear? and just say to the person driving, look, just adjust them on the track and be open to kind of changing them and see how it goes. You might find, especially from a different track and from a different race and grip level, because also actually another important thing, if you've a high grip track, okay, and you've brakes that are locking really heavily, instead of actually locking and stopping, that's going to lock and skid forward. So never think you have to have really, really high brake amount on a high grip track. No, because if you have it too much, it's going to brake and just skid forward instead of actually braking and locking because there's so much grip on the track. So just always have that initial bit.
Same as when you're driving a real car, you never lock your brakes before you come to a corner, you know?
And that's...
Sorry, question on the braking with the Minis. The four-wheel drive has got the brakes at the back and the front, however it's belt driven. So if you change the brakes in the front, it brakes at the back as well. How do you get the balance on something like that?
You can change it by the feeler gauges on the. You want to get feeler gauges.
You want the fronts to brake before the rears, always.
But the problem is though, if you brake the front, you've got the belt that joins the back wheel.
It's only a two-channel,
so it automatically brakes the back as well. But it's got
then
brakes
you can adjust the thickness of the disc, so that when you put the brake on, you can make that one a little bit wider, that one a bit smaller. So the fronts just start braking before it brakes all.
On the Minis, you can't even change the disc thickness. So again, you go by the brake pads. So you just get a feeler gauge, and you make sure that on the front, okay, that when you lock up, you have that kind of quite heavy bit. But then on the rear, you can just change the gap between the...
No, it's on the middle, see?
Oh, yeah.
I think what it means...
The problem is, though, you've got the belt driving the rear wheels as well. There's no diff. So if you brake the front wheels, it automatically locks the back.
There's no one way in there. So you're locking. You lock the front, you lock the back.
Well, then ignore the bit.
Then ignore the brake bias, but you still want to make sure you try and have that initial brake on the Minis. And obviously you can't change the bias, but if you happen to move up to a different scale, just keep that in mind. And on the Minis, but still on the front, it's important you play around with the brake pad anyway, and get an idea of what it's like and change it, and you might find it's better if you change the gap a little bit. And that's kind of really all we kind
so
of
you can adjust it, you see, because you've got your rod. So you can adjust your rod so that when you put your brakes on...
What you're saying is the back and the front are connected by the belt. So
I know that, but what I'm saying is you can adjust it so that when you're braking, it will brake the fronts, right? But it's not braking the rears and the other.
Yeah, but the belt will brake, it's used as a braking.
I see. Oh, right, okay. There's a different...
There's a very slight lag because of the belt.
There you go, that's something that we didn't know, that's something that...
We don't race four-wheel drive.
Yeah, that's something that the Minis know from a brake point of view. But that's kind of like all we kind of thought about really talking about from a setup point of view.